Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the C-Bus Paranormal Paracast. As always, I'm your host, Johnathon Robson, and today's episode will be a special and our first Q&A episode. So I have a feeling that I'll be discussing all sorts of weird, strange, and crazy topics that have been submitted by our listeners. First off, I do appreciate everybody that's had their questions in for a while now, in some cases even months. Obviously, things have been a bit chaotic for myself and the team this year, so this episode and a few others were unfortunately pushed back a bit due to the circumstances. So again, thank you all for your patience and support during this time. Before I start getting into your questions, I do want to thank those of you that have been giving me feedback on the recent 1912 Dresden, Ohio train wreck episode, and for the interview with Jeff and Amy at Prospect Place Mansion. I've noticed that our audience seems to like new facts and new information about our cases, and I honestly try to add as much of it as I can into each episode. Sometimes that can be a challenge depending on the show's topic. So it's always good to hear positive feedback from listeners of the show, and I do appreciate your support. In related news, ironically, Jeff and I did conduct a small investigation of Prospect Place after our interview, and we did come away with a few unique experiences. During the time we were there, we attempted to reach out to the new potential spirit possibilities that we discussed during our interview on episode 17. I do believe that we had an EVP response and confirmation on the name Sophia Robinson. So that was pretty fascinating. And while we were asking about James Adams, the tone of the house seemed to shift a bit. Jeff and I were sitting on a bench on the first floor of the mansion, and we both started noticeably feeling a little bit different. It was kind of hard to describe, but we both felt like something was trying to make its presence known to us. The air in the area seemed really heavy and charged for a few minutes in front of the stairway, before the conditions seemingly returned back to normal. I've had these feelings in the past at different locations, but never at Prospect Place. So perhaps this experience was an acknowledgement that we were on the right track in some shape or form. It should be interesting to see what happens with the mansion in the months ahead, with its history and its possible hauntings. In other Paracast news, some of you might have also noticed some of the recent paranormal activity on our audio and YouTube feeds. I have been doing a little bit of work behind the scenes on both fronts, and also updating some of the old artwork and episode information. I've also unlocked previous Legends and Lore episodes for subscribers on our main audio feed. Our Patreon feed is also still available for our folks that like the early access, ad-free episodes, and similar content that can't be accessed through our audio feed. These new updates and features should help me expand the show in the future, and also help provide some new exclusive content. So stay tuned for more updates. That being said, let's get into some of your questions. Our first question was asked on our Facebook page from Ray Neese of Columbus, Ohio. Have you ever investigated the North Market area in Columbus? Very good question, Ray. Unfortunately, I haven't had that opportunity, but I have been keeping an eye on the situation for quite some time. For those of you that are unaware, the North Market in Columbus, Ohio has been digging up their past, literally. And an excavation project has started in the market's old parking lot to exhume human remains from the old North Graveyard. Yeah. Some of our old politicians and founders dropped the ball on that one. Big time. Originally, the North Graveyard was one of 5 cemeteries that were built when Columbus began to expand at the beginning of the 19th century. At the time, its location was just outside of the city's center. When the area became more desirable for land development, numerous individuals and businesses wanted the space to build. In turn, in the mid-1800s, city officials asked the locals to stop burying their dead in the cemetery and started moving bodies elsewhere. Similar to my past story on the Hempfield Tunnel, the process was far from perfect. Apparently, some of the locals were still using the graveyard for family burials during this time. This made it extremely difficult to relocate all of the remains, and the workers often missed graves. And some other graves were left because their families didn't claim their bodies, or in some cases they were no longer marked. Although the city relocated several hundreds of graves over several decades, many bodies were left and eventually built and paved over. As the area began to develop, construction workers also came across human remains at times. In 2001, it finally came to light on how many graves were still left behind from the North Graveyard, when an excavation was done for a sewer line project. The site's workers stated it seemed like the entire cemetery was still there during the construction. There is now a proposal to build a new building on the site, and archaeologists are now currently carefully exhuming the remains that they find. Eventually, they hope to do a report on their findings and move the remains to Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus. So essentially, this is Columbus's very own poltergeist type story. I've actually been to the North Market quite a few times in recent years, including during the excavations. It's an awesome location for fellow food lovers, and the situation's a bit morbid but also fascinating. I'm also curious to see how many grave sites will be found over time. The last number I heard was 40, but that's been a couple months ago. Overall, I think the location outside would be difficult to investigate with all the foot traffic in the area. But if the market or any of the surrounding buildings called us in, we'd gladly find a way to make it happen. I think personally that if ghosts and hauntings truly exist, this location would be a possible hotspot for activity. So thank you once again for the question, Ray, and I'll keep monitoring that situation. Or if you have some ties to get in there, let me know. Our next set of questions are from Sandra through our website's contact form. It states, "You've obviously been critical of paranormal shows in the past and for good reason. Are there any shows that you still personally watch, or that might be more credible than the others? And what do you think of the recent drama between Zach and Nick on Twitter?" Well, for the first question, not really. I stopped watching the ghost shows overall a few years ago. If I do watch anything, it's usually in passing for the alleged location history more than anything else. I tried to watch the new Ghost Hunter series when it came out, but I had to stop when I caught him faking EMF evidence on TV with a bad camera edit. So that pretty much ended that for me. Now, a person that I do still watch when I can is Josh Gates. I really like his work on Expedition Unknown, and I think he's more credible out of all the current TV shows. But that show in particular is a bit more about the history as opposed to the mystery and the paranormal. His other show, Expedition X, can be interesting, but it's a little annoying that they seem to ignore the supposed scientist of the group in favor of the girl with her $5 laser pointers and SLS cameras. That's where the show loses me. I'd personally like to see more of a deproving, debunking front instead of the full-on believer perspective it's often aired, but overall I do still find the show entertaining. And the Zach and Nick drama. I'll play the sample from what you're talking about and let the rest of you hear it. Nick made this video a few months ago, and obviously it was highly controversial for fans of both individuals at the time. So here it is.
Okay, let's get into this. I got all your questions. I sorted through them. Let me start off by saying this. I never had an NDA. I was not fired from Ghost Adventures. I never did, quote, a bad thing. I never cheated in a relationship that I was in. I was misled with the ongoing of Paranormal Lockdown. I kept my head up for 9 years. I pushed forward. I kept trying to move on, creating new hit shows. But the previous hosts that I used to work with keep trying to stop my career. So this is my story. This is from my perspective, and now I have to talk about it.
Okay, Rachel asked, this may be controversial, I know, but what was it like working on the GA team after the documentary and Fame hit? Just wondering if rumors are true about you-know-whose ego from experience. I questioned him once about how he treats his team and was blocked instantly.
In my opinion, this rumor is true. I witnessed it firsthand, and I saw him treat people just as poorly. This host was terrible to work with. It was an extremely hostile environment to work in, and also Dakota can speak on his experience with him too.
Extremely hostile environment to work in. Who would have guessed? Let's continue.
All right, this is from Glenda from Texas. Aaron has already explained why you were fired. You went behind Zach's back, started a new show without discussing anything with him. Trying to destroy him at this late date will do you no good, except she spelled no wrong.
I did not get fired. That is false. I did not go behind anyone's back. My contract allowed me to produce other shows, just like the other host who I was working with, who produced several other shows. This is simply jealousy, nothing to do with legalities.
There were multiple questions regarding whether or not you believe that you have been limited or blocked from appearing on Travel Channel.
In my opinion, I do believe I was blocked from the network and continuing my shows, specifically because of one host who I used to work with. And the reason I know this is because several executives I spoke to at the network said, I can't come to that network as long as he's there. And also, years later, speaking to Dakota, who finally spoke out about it and confirmed it for me, that yes, when he was filming with this one host at a location, this host came into the room bragging, laughing, saying, ha ha ha, Nick's never going to work in America again because I gave the network an ultimatum to choose him or me. So now having that confirmation, this is the reason I'm speaking out today about it, because finally someone has the guts to talk about it publicly.
Alright, it sounds like Zach is really mad about Nick using his contract clause to produce other paranormal shows on the same network. And because we all know Zach's ego wouldn't allow that, he used his leverage at the Travel Channel and threatened to leave the network knowing that they wouldn't let him go due to the ratings and brand of Ghost Adventures. Parapolitics. Fun stuff.
There's a ton of questions wanting to know exactly why you left Ghost Adventures.
In my opinion, based on what I was told, a certain individual that I worked with called up the network and said he would not show up at the next location if I showed up. I was dragged along for 2 months and I kept being told, we don't need you at this next location. Then another week would go by, we don't need you at that location. Got to the point where I was dragged along for so long that my lawyer finally stepped in. He gave me a choice. I could either move on and make something better, create something new, or just be a sitting duck and just wait. So I chose to move on and create Paranormal Lockdown.
Okay, so this brings me to a bunch of other questions that have to do with Paranormal Lockdown. People want to know what happened to Paranormal Lockdown. Many of them are saying it was my favorite paranormal show of all time.
Paranormal Lockdown became one of the highest rated shows for the network at the time. And yes, it is true that a merger was occurring and we were kind of on hiatus, still filming. But then I was told by the network executives that we would continue Paranormal Lockdown into 20 episodes and keep going after it. But then suddenly, radio silence. We had to get on the phone, talk to the network, and try to figure out what is going on, because this is what I was being promised. And this brings me back around to what Dakota witnessed about a certain individual, a host who walked into the room bragging and talking about how he stopped Paranormal Lockdown. I believe I know what happened to my show, Paranormal Lockdown, but what do you guys think?
A lot of people have sent screenshots or even tagged us in the original tweets that Zach posted years ago. And it goes like this. Zach says, anyone out there who gets fired from a job for doing bad things can't use said job as a resume of achievements, total deception. He goes on to say, please for one time in your life, do something 100% original. And then continues to say, disgusted to see someone using our show name, Ghost Adventures, to keep promoting shows and himself that we want absolutely nothing to do with.
Here's proof that he's putting out statements about me, talking about how I did, quote, bad things. Multiple people in the industry reached out to me and stated Zach called them and told them not to work with me. And as far as him going on and saying, I use Ghost Adventures for my resume, yes, it is part of my resume. I helped create the title, Ghost Adventures. I edited it. I was a co-creator. I was in it for 10 seasons. I have every right to use Ghost Adventures on my resume. Bottom line, these are false statements and his way of trying to ruin my reputation.
Zach's personality really shows in those tweets as well as his jealousy. While I'm not a fan of the show in general, it's pretty lame to try to be a control freak to that level. As Nick stated, he was a producer, editor, and appeared on 10 seasons of the show. Of course he'll use that on his resume. He created a lot of it.
I'm way happier now. I have full control of my projects. I'm away from toxic people. There's no restraints. And I'm able to pursue my passion of real paranormal investigations with credible evidence. I could go on and on about why I have zero respect for these certain people that I worked with in the past. I have never allowed anything to stand in my way. Tessa and I will not allow anything negative to stand in our way with everything that we have coming up. I'm putting all these rumors to rest because, again, we're moving forward. Tessa and I have been doing this since we were little kids, and we look forward to continuing to bring you real paranormal content.
Real paranormal investigations, credible evidence, and real paranormal content. Right. So, as you heard, Nick is finally coming out and blaming Zach for some of the controversy on the Travel Channel show cancellations. This was released after one of Nick's projects and Destination Fear was canceled. Both Nick and Dakota Layton started speaking out about Zach around the same time. But let's be serious here. It's obvious Zach has a history of faking evidence, providing a ton of misinformation, and he can't go more than 2 episodes without claiming to confront a demon or being possessed. It's outrageous. However, let's not forget Nick was also there for a lot of that nonsense for years, and also put his name on it. I honestly feel for his show's current situation, but it's hard for me to feel bad for him at the same time. Not to mention a lot of his shows since have also been rather questionable. Now, Dakota Layden's early YouTube videos were hilarious, and I honestly like his Ghost Adventure spoofs more than what I've seen of his show Destination Fear. If you can still find him online, definitely watch him. He nailed Zach's personality long before he actually worked with him. Overall, to me, it's just paranormal drama. I don't really have much of an opinion other than it's amusing to see two TV entertainment folks bickering with themselves online. I honestly haven't watched enough of Dakota's newer projects to really form an opinion on his material yet, other than the fact that I like some of his comedy. Thank you for the question, Sandra. The next set of questions come from our online contact form from Tim S., if that's your real last name. Hello, I enjoy your show, but I was wondering if you'd ever consider making it weekly. And also, what do you have against Michigan? I've noticed you've never investigated up here. Thanks. Unfortunately, I doubt that a weekly show will ever happen. As much as I'd like to be able to do it, family life, work, and other time restrictions would make it nearly impossible for me at the moment. My day job actually just switched my hours as well, and I'm already feeling a little more crunched for time than I have been in the past. I hope you also appreciate the amount of research that I do on each show. I think a weekly show would hurt my ability to take the time to properly research each topic and give the attention to detail that each case deserves. Hopefully this time crunch will only be temporary, but you never know. I might be able to do some one-offs along the way in between episodes at some point. And for the other question, what do I have against Michigan? Well, honestly nothing. But I have had some bad experiences up there in the past during my days in music. I remember playing a venue called the Black and Moon Concert Hall. I believe that was the name. It was in an interesting part of town. I remember there being a death metal venue, a record store, an adult store, payday loan center, fish fry, and a McDonald's play place in the same shopping center. Let's just say it was pretty diverse. Perhaps it was a paranormal experience in its own right. I do remember getting pulled over after the show and feeling a little harassed, likely because I was young and from out of state. For whatever reason, I was feeling a little crabby about the whole experience afterwards, and it honestly rubbed me the wrong way. The second time I was up there, my band literally conjured up a tornado at a festival called Bludgeon Fest. I kid you not. It had been raining most of the week leading up to that show, and there was water and flooding everywhere. We finished playing our set list and was expecting to get help from the people that was running the venue that day, but they were nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the tornado siren hit, and we were stuck outside fighting the elements trying to get our equipment back into the van. We had to carry our own gear through massive winds and flooded fields before we finally was able to huddle into a small bar on the premises, hoping that the weather would pass. Meanwhile, we seen funnel clouds across the street destroying everything in sight. The stage, the sound area, the tents, porta potties, everything was flipped, damaged, and destroyed. The rest of the festival was canceled, and I never stepped foot in Michigan again. So I assure you, Tim, it's nothing personal about your paranormal hotspots up there, but I haven't been in a hurry to come up and visit the state since. Maybe that'll change in the future, and hopefully the third time's a charm. Thanks for your questions. It reminded me of that traumatic experience. Our next set of questions are from the West Virginia Bigfoot. I'm pretty sure I've heard from you in the past. It states, I've been listening to the show since the beginning, and I really like how you call out a lot of the stories and legends in this field, and I appreciate hearing an honest and semi-skeptical take. What has been your favorite investigation since your team returned? And for fun, who would win in a fight between Mothman and a Flatwoods monster if they existed? Oh boy. A cryptid combat question. For the first part of the question, honestly, I have a few different answers to that. I feel that my entire experience with the 1912 Dresden train wreck was the most rewarding to me personally. To be able to find the crash site and to tell the stories of the victims in the event was very important to me, especially with all the mystery, misinformation, and legends surrounding it. It was also important for me to personally find the gravesite of the victims and pay my respects. From a paranormal sense, and this might surprise some people out there, but Charles Mill Lake, it was fun. There were just so many oddball stories to research around the area, and I like a lot of the lore surrounding the lake's alleged monsters, even if some of it's pretty far-fetched. Tracking the Orange Eyes legend up to Norwalk was also interesting, considering how much the story and the locations were blurred at times for the creature's overall story. And from an exploration perspective, Flatwoods, West Virginia was fun to visit, and I also enjoyed hiking multiple times at Salt Fork State Park, even though I did declare a lot of shenanigans on the park's Bigfoot claims. So I guess my answer is all of them. It's honestly hard for me to pick just one this time around. I think I just missed being part of the field, and it's good to be back. And for the cryptid battle question, Mothman or the Flatwoods Monster? I guess it would depend on which version of the Flatwoods Monster we're talking about here. Some of the witnesses claimed it didn't have arms, which could put it at a severe disadvantage. But then again, a later sighting said it had arms and a toxic-like touch, so that particular version would likely stand a better chance. No offense to the Mothman, but Flatwoods Monster is probably my favorite cryptid, so I'm Team Braxy on this one. Thank you for your questions. Paranormal investigators, it's time to start planning for your upcoming investigations and to also stock up on new ghost hunting devices. Thankfully, GhostStop has you covered. GhostStop has everything you need to advance your team's research and theories. They have digital recorders, camcorders, thermal imagers, EMF devices, laser grids, and much, much more. If you need it, they likely have it. Our team has used several GhostStop products over the years. Click the GhostStop link on this episode's information panel or on our website at cbusparanormal.com, and you can browse through their extensive catalog and place your order today. By using the show's affiliate link on our player and website, you'll also be supporting our show, and this lets GhostStop know that we sent you. GhostStop, paranormal equipment made by investigators for investigators. And for our last submitted question today, I received this one via text last week. I found it interesting. From Nick in Columbus. Hope you don't mind me sharing it, brother. Have you ever heard anything about Denison University and the cemetery they have? Apparently there's a creepy little cemetery established in 1833 that's supposed to be for faculty members and presidents of the university. However, there are also unmarked children graves and some other odd stories. I've also heard that many of the graves were moved from another site. It seems a little odd and perhaps suspicious. In short, I honestly haven't heard anything about it, but I have started looking into it, considering the universities around Granville, Ohio, that's already got my interest. There have been rumors that other locations in town, such as the Buxton Inn and the Brian Dew Mansion, have been reportedly haunted for years, and in general, it's just a very old community. Apparently, there are also numerous ghost stories and legends surrounding a few spots on the campus, including Chamberlain Lodge, Slater Hall, and the library. Personally, I don't find that particularly odd, as most universities seem to have some sort of haunted story floating around them, but they have had a few teams come in and host fundraisers there in the past. From what I've read, Old College Hill Cemetery used to be located on Old College Homestead, but was moved in 1854 to its present location. Man, what's with all the relocated cemeteries on this episode? So that does appear to be true. The cemetery is also for select senior officials and for longtime members of the facility and their families. But there is indeed also a tombstone in the cemetery, labeled Unknown Infants. I'm guessing they found some remains of a few unknown bodies when they relocated it. Perhaps there was a similar circumstance like we previously discussed about the North Market. I personally want to do some more research on this case, and I feel it's warranted and interesting. Maybe we'll hear more about it on the next season of the Paracast. I'll certainly keep you posted as I dig further into the stories and its related information. Well, that concludes this month's episode of the C-Bus Paranormal Paracast. I hope that everybody enjoyed me rambling on all sorts of random paranormal topics this month. Perhaps we'll do it again in the future. If you like the show, please subscribe to our podcast channel, add us on social media, and tell your friends about it. Your support truly helps to keep the Paracast going, and it's always good to hear from our show's listeners, new and old. Next month will be the season finale of the Paracast, and also the Halloween edition. As always, thank you for listening, everybody, and I'll see you next month. Thank you for listening.